Welcome back. When most people hear the word meek, they picture the same thing: quiet, passive, spineless, someone who never pushes back, never speaks up, never takes up space, someone who absorbs whatever is thrown at them and smiles through it. And because Jesus described himself as meek in Matthew chapter 11 verse 29, that image gets projected onto him. A gentle, soft-spoken figure who never offended anyone, never raised his voice, and floated through life in a permanent state of compassivity. But that is not the Jesus of the gospel, and it is not what the word meek actually means. The Greek word translated to meek in the New Testament is praus, and in the ancient world praus had a very specific meaning that has almost nothing to do with passivity. Praus was used to describe a war horse that had been trained, a powerful, strong, capable animal whose strength had been brought under discipline and control. The horse was not weak, it was not broken, it was powerful, but that power was now directed with precision rather than chaos. That is the biblical definition of meekness. Not weakness, but controlled strength, power under discipline, the capacity for force directed intentionally rather than wildly. That changes everything about how you read the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek does not mean blessed are the pushovers. It means blessed are those whose strength is under God's control. Now look at Jesus in the temple in John 2. He arrives at the temple and finds it turned into a marketplace, money changers, livestock traders, the court of the Gentiles, the one space in the entire temple complex where non-Jewish people could come and pray, was converted into a commercial operation. And what does Jesus do? Verse 15 says, "So he made a whip out of cords, and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle." He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. He made a whip, he drove out animals, he scattered money, he overturned tables. This was not a gentle suggestion. This was deliberate, forceful, calculated action in the face of genuine injustice. That is not a doormat, that is praus, controlled strength deployed with precision for a righteous purpose. And this was not the only time Jesus pushed back with force. In Matthew 23, he publicly and repeatedly confronts the Pharisees, the most powerful religious figures of his day. He openly exposes them, calling them hypocrites, blind guides, whitewashed tombs, and a brood of vipers. This is the same Jesus who said, "Blessed are the meek," the same Jesus who described himself as gentle and humble in heart. Meekness did not make him passive in the face of corruption and exploitation. It made his response precise, purposeful, and completely without ego. Look at how Jesus handled Pilate in John 19, standing before the most powerful political authority in the region. His life literally in Pilate's hands. And Pilate says, "Do you not know I have the power to crucify you or release you?" Jesus responds in verse 11, saying, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above." No fear, no flattery, no desperate attempt to appease. Calm, direct, unintimidated truth spoken to power from a position of complete inner security. That is not passivity. That is the most powerful kind of strength there is, the kind that does not need the approval or the fear of another person to stand firm. But let's be honest, maintaining this balance is incredibly difficult. Most of us default to one of two extremes. We either blow up in anger or we shut down in passive compliance. True meekness feels almost impossible. So where did the passive doormat image of meekness come from? Partly from poor translation choices that stripped the word of its original force, partly from a church culture that confused gentleness with spinelessness and called the confusion humility, and partly from a misreading of verses like Matthew 5 verse 39 that says turn the other cheek as commands to absorb abuse without response. But turning the other cheek in its original cultural context was not passive surrender. In first-century Jewish culture, being struck on the right cheek with the back of the hand was an act of social humiliation used by the powerful against the powerless. Turning the other cheek forced the aggressor to either strike with an open hand, which implied equality, or walk away. It was a nonviolent act of dignified defiance, not submission. Jesus was not teaching people to become doormats. He was teaching people how to resist dehumanization without becoming what they were resisting. Biblical meekness is not the absence of strength. It is strength that has been surrendered to God's direction rather than the ego's demands. It is the capacity to be forceful, but choosing not to be unless righteousness demands it. The capacity to fight back, but choosing the right battle at the right moment for the right reason. The capacity to speak hard truth, but from a place of love rather than pride. That requires more discipline than either aggression or passivity. It is the hardest posture to maintain, and it is exactly what Jesus modeled from the temple courts to the cross. Meek does not mean weak. It never did. It means your strength is no longer running on ego. It is running on something far more steady and far more dangerous. To injustice. True meekness isn't about staying quiet. It's about knowing when to speak and having the discipline to hold back when our own ego wants to fight. If this changed how you view the character of Jesus, let's talk about it honestly in the comments below. Have you ever struggled to balance strength with restraint? Let's build a community focused on truth, not trends. Consider subscribing to join us on the journey.